Welcome to the Life in Him TV show. My name is Pontus J. Back. I work as a traveling evangelist out of Frank Mank Center, PJB Ministries, the Ambassadors for Jesus Christ Motorcycle Ministry, and I also work alongside Pastor Tommy Lilia for PTL Ministries in Sweden and in the third world countries. During my trips, I meet a lot of wonderful people with touching life stories about what Jesus has done in their life. And after I saw the impact, my own life story, the testimony about what Jesus Christ has done in my life, that's when I wanted to start to share other people's life stories all around the world. So once again, welcome to the Life in Him TV show. My name is Pontus J. Back.
Hold your life in Him!
Death or life, which will you choose? I'm calling you. I'm calling you.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Life in Him. My name is Pontus J. Back. I'm in Lakeland, Florida, together with, I should call him my big brother in the Lord. His name is Larry Howard. And the first time I heard that name was in the early 90s when I got a blues record with Larry Howard. And then I thought it was funny when he was singing, "Look at the sky, Jesus is coming." For me, it took, I don't know how many years, but a lot of years before I realized that we have to look to the sky because Jesus is coming. And last night I had the privilege and honor to meet Larry, and today we met him in his studio, and he's gonna tell you about his life in Him.
Life in Him!
When I was small, like real young, some of my family went to church, and I went some when I was real small, like 6, 7 years old or something. But then, after that, and I started growing up right here in Polk County where we're sitting, and I got involved in all the stuff, you know, that was like a lot of people now talk about, you know, well, there's so many drugs, there's so many this and that and the other. Well, it wasn't any different from me back in the 60s, you know. It wasn't as prevalent as it is now, but I started, you know, working with music and stuff like that. So, you know, I guess to answer the question, you know, did I grow up in church? No. I went to church a few times, but I never was involved in church, and I went through the years in the music business back then. I went through, you know, reading different types of stuff, you know, metaphysical stuff, and, you know, looked at Eastern religions and all that, and looked at, you know, Christian religion too, but I really wasn't into any of it. So I didn't grow up in church. And oddly enough, I think one of the reasons that I've been so blessed to be able to share the gospel with people is because, like Pontus was saying earlier, you know, I was a bad boy, you know, and people didn't want to be around bad boys, you know. And to my knowledge, nobody ever came and shared Christ with me, you know. I dug it out of the dirt, so to speak, you know, from the Bible. And I OD'd several times, you know, through the years on the road. And then in 1980, August of 1980, I was here in Florida. I was born in Winter Haven, Florida, right down the road from where we're sitting. And I was here. I had gotten out of the band Grinderswitch that I was in, had left in December and came back to Florida. And I guess in some odd way I was going to try to get myself straightened out, you know. Told my wife, you know, we got to get out of here. I'm going to go back to Florida. And I came back here to Florida, and just started partying even harder, you know. It was sort of like the prodigal son in reverse, you know. I came back to my hometown and everybody went, wow, let's party, you know. And then on August 20th, 1980, I OD'd. I'd been up for days. This was before they had crack cocaine, but we were doing the Richard Pryor thing and, you know, freebase and coke and eating Quaaludes and stuff with it. And I OD'd. I was sitting on the side of a bed and I stood up, and when I OD'd, I went over face first on the floor. And it was a hard slate floor, and I fell right on my face on the floor. And it busted up my nose and my cheekbones and cut the inside of my mouth all open, busted my chin, fractured my jaw on both sides. When I hit, my head went back and I hit on my chin. And they got me to the hospital. And even though I hadn't grown up in church the last couple of years before that, in 78 and 79, I began to read the Bible. And it was a strange thing because, like most people, you know, I had some, you know, Bible laying around on some dusty shelf, but I wasn't reading it. And I really got into reading it, and a good friend of mine began to come over and read it with me. Joe English, he was at the time was a drummer for Paul McCartney and Wings, and we'd spend hours and hours reading the Bible together. But we really didn't know what we were reading. I mean, neither of us had been in church or anything. All we knew, it's sort of like Mark Twain said, you know, it's not those things in the Bible that I don't understand that bothers me. It's the things that I do understand. And so, like, I'm reading all this stuff and I'm going, well, I don't understand most of this, but some of it's real clear to me right now. And Joe and I began to read that just over and over. He'd come in off the road with Paul, and he'd come in and come over to my house, or I'd go out to his house, and we'd sit and read and read and read. Sometimes, you know, we'd just have a big plate full of cocaine sitting there, and we're snorting cocaine, reading the Bible for days at a time, you know. And a lot of people said that's, you know, that's really strange. You know, why would you be doing drugs and reading the Bible? Well, I did drugs. That was part of my everyday life, you know. So we began to read it, and one day Joe looked at me and said, do you think this is what we're reading? He said, do you think this is on the level? Is this true? And I went, yeah, I think it is the truth, and we're in big trouble. And Joe left that day, and I left, and I told my wife, I said, I don't know what God's doing, but something's going on. And we came back to Florida, and then I OD'd down here. And I was in the hospital room, and they'd call my family and everything to come to the hospital, and they said he's not going to make it. You know, there's nothing else we can do for him. I'd been in the hospital then for like 9 hours or something in the operating room. They hadn't even tried to repair anything on my face because they didn't think I was going to live. And so I'm in the operating room, and like, I was like up in the corner of the operating room, like up high, looking at myself and looking at the people in there. And I could hear everybody, just like I'm sitting here talking to you, but the people couldn't hear me. And I was just watching what was going on. Then I saw everybody leave, and they left me in there by myself in that operating room. And I later learned that the doctors went out at that time and said, you know, we can't save him, there's nothing we can do. And like, I'm laying up there I'm up in the top of the room looking at myself on this operating table, and I just began to cry out to God. I said, God, you know, I'm so embarrassed. I'm so ashamed that I've had this opportunity in the music business, traveled all over the world, made records, did all that. I've had all these opportunities that everybody wants, and this is what it's come to. Now I'm dying, you know, in front of you. None of that makes any difference. what makes a difference to me is I'm ashamed that this is going to happen in front of you. I was talking to God. And to me, it was like I was talking audibly. I can't say that God was speaking back to me audibly. I don't know, but I guess I sort of made the proverbial deal, you know, that you hear about the deals the blues men make with the devil at the crossroads, you know, and I said, God, I'm so ashamed. If you'll put me back in that body, I'll do whatever you want from then on. I had no idea what that even meant. I just knew it was the right thing to do. And I said, I'll go and do whatever you want me to do. You just tell me what you want me to do. If you'll put me back in that body, I'll do it. And that was on August 20th in 1980. And when I said that, my eyes popped open on the operating table. And I was completely straight. I'd gone from dying from an overdose and all that stuff in my body to just being totally straight. And at that moment I went, there really is a God, and He's interested in me. And, you know, not only is there a God, but He's talking to me, you know. And it was like, I'm going, wow, man, this is like. So they came in, fixed me up, sewed me up, and patched me up the best they could. And I got out of the hospital that night, or maybe the next morning, I forget. But anyway, I went home from the hospital, and my face was all busted up. And by that time, after a day or so, my face was just swollen. I couldn't see, my eyes were swollen shut. My lips and nose, everything was all busted up. They'd put a rubber hose in my chin, drain the fluid off my face because I was, you know, had so much fluid from swelling. And I think it was on a Thursday, and the only person I knew down here that went to church was my brother. And so I called him up, and I said, he knew what had happened. And I said, brother, will you take me to church with you on Sunday? And I didn't know what church he went to or anything, you know. And I said, will you take me to church with you on Sunday? He about dropped the telephone because he and I were like a year apart, and he'd seen the destruction in my life for years, you know. And he said, yeah, I'd be glad to. I said, can you come by and pick me up on Sunday morning? And I said, I look pretty rough. And he said, no, I'm gonna come get you right now. This was on Thursday night or Friday morning. And in his heart, I guess God was speaking to him too, because in his heart, he was saying, you know, turn him loose back on the street for a couple of days would be real dangerous for him right now. And at that point, even though I didn't understand fully the gospel and what I needed to do, I knew in my heart that, you know, that I had confessed my sins to God and asked Him to forgive me and to put me back in that body. So technicality, was I really saved at that point or not? I hadn't accepted Christ as such, in the vernacular way, you know, that you normally do it. He came, picked me up, and took me to his house. My wife and I, on that day, we separated. She said, I can't do this anymore. And so when I came home from the hospital, you know, she was gone. And I went to my brother's. On Sunday morning, my brother came in the bedroom, knocked on the door, and he said, get up, it's time to go to church. And I'm thinking, am I really gonna do this, you know? And my hair was about the length it is now, I guess, back then, you know, long hair and full beard. And they'd just cut big swatches of my beard out, sewing my chin and stuff up. And my face was all swollen up, and I looked like some kind of monster, you know, from some movie or something, you know. It was really ugly. And he knocked on the door and he said, "Brother, get up, it's time to go to church." And he opened the door and reached in there and handed me this lime green suit. And I hadn't had a suit on, at that point, I don't know if I'd ever had a suit on or not. And had a white shirt and this big flowered Hawaiian looking tie, and I put all that stuff on and tied a big knot of some kind in it, and I'm looking in the mirror and I'm going, this is really weird stuff here now, you know. My face, my eyes, I could just barely see through my eyes. I got dressed and he took me to church, and I remember pulling in the parking lot of the church here in Lakeland. It was Carl Straders Church, Assembly of God. And I remember pulling in the parking lot, and I could tell something was happening to me. My heart was beating fast, but it wasn't like fear. It was almost like a revelation taking place in my spirit and stuff. And so I'm thinking, like, I'm gonna walk in this church, you know, and all these straight people in here, and they're gonna freak out when they see me, you know. And I walked in the back door, and church had already started. And when I walked in, I was trying to sort of be incognito, you know. And when I walked in, everybody in church turned around and looked, and it was like, I began to walk down the aisle of that church, and instead of people throwing me out of there, they began to reach out and put their hands on me and touch me. And I really needed that right then. That was the first time that I experienced the love of God through the body of Christ. And I needed it real bad right then. And I sat down in a pew, and this man was up there preaching, and later found out his name was Carl Straders, and still a friend of mine today. And I don't know what he preached about. It seemed like to me he preached for 3 or 4 hours, you know, but at the end of it, he gave an invitation for anybody that wanted to come forward and accept Christ. And I immediately got up and went down to the altar, and I think that was on August 24th, and I guess officially became a believer that day and accepted Christ. And since then, it's been one miracle right after another. I mean, we're sitting in a really nice studio here, you know, and it's been used for the kingdom of God, and it's all paid for. I don't owe a dime on anything in here. People through the years have contributed to this, and been all over the world just sharing the love of Christ with people. And I'm pretty radical about it, maybe in different ways than some people. It's not like, I'm not a very religious person in the sense of, you know, denominational religion and stuff like that. I mean, I think that religion can get you into a whole lot of trouble real fast, get you in deeper than you want to be. I got a job. I thought I was going to get a job at a music store here in Lakeland, and I went over there, and they said, "No, we don't have anything," because I was a musician, you know. I thought, well, I'll go sell some instruments or something. And they sent me over to a company, and they had one job available, toting bricks in this hot Florida sun. And that was in August in Florida. and I weighed 117 pounds. I weigh about 217 now, pork chops. But I started toting bricks in this brickyard in the sand lot. The sand was so deep they couldn't get a truck in there. So they'd set them off by the road, and my job was to take all these bricks by hand and load them on a trailer, pull them with a tractor through the sand to get them out to where they needed to go. And I did that hours and hours, day after day after day. And like I'm thinking, well, what am I doing? You know, I've been staying in fancy hotels and riding in limousines and flying private planes, and I'm toting bricks in a brickyard, you know. And of course, some people that knew me, you know, that weren't believers at the time and were going, what is he doing? You know, this is like so insane, you know. And, but I had peace of God about it. And every time that I picked up a load of bricks, it felt good. So I went from 117 pounds with a pair of cut-off shorts and tennis shoes toting bricks, you know, to about 185 pounds of bulk, you know. And Pastor Straders, I remember I had to ask him questions sometimes, and I said, you know, what do I do with my wife, you know? He said, you need to pray for her. He said, you know, pray for her 3 times a day, you know, and pray for her without ceasing, but make it a point to pray for her, you know, and put her in God's hands, you know. So that's what I did. And when I was at work, it was steaming hot, and I had a 30-minute lunch break. So I'd go in the porta toilet out on the job and just get on my knees in the porta toilet and pray for my wife. I didn't even smell the stuff in the toilet. I mean, that was my prayer closet for several months, was that toilet, you know, sitting out in the hot sun. And one day my wife called and she said, I was outside last night. She was staying with some friends, and she said, I looked up in the sky, and she said it was like the sky just parted open. She said it's the middle of the night, and it's like the sky just parted. And I'm looking at this light in the sky, and she said ever since then, she said when that happened, it was like the only thing I knew to be real was I needed to be with my husband. And so she called and told me, she said, you know, I don't want anything to do with church or Christian friends, you know, any of that. But I know I need to be with my husband. I said, come on home, darling, come on down. And she came back, and I think that was in January maybe, or February of the next year. And I didn't force her to go to church. I didn't force anything on her. I said, you know, I'll love you the best way I can. I'll try to love you like Christ is loving on me, you know. And I sat her down at the table and I said, but if you ever make me choose between my love for you and my love for him, I'm gonna have to go with him, because I won't be any good for you without him. Sort of shocking, you know, when you tell your wife, you know, I'm in love with another man, you know, his name's Jesus, you know, and she's not even a believer, and she's going, I don't know what's going on with this guy. And then in February, I got up one morning and she was laying up pacing the floor. I got out of bed and I came to the living room. I said, what is wrong? She had, at that point, had gone to church with me willingly a couple of times, enough to, you know, hear Pastor Straders speak. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, I feel like if I don't accept Christ today, I'll never get another chance. And I said, well, maybe you should do that. And she just fell on her knees and started crying. I got down there with her and prayed with her and led her to the Lord. And then I took her to church. I see this little lady that I'd been going to see for counseling. And she became a believer, and that was all those years ago. We're still here. We're still together, happy together. So did I go to church when I was young? No, but God can get to you where you're at. You know, I believe we need to be going to church because I believe in the fellowship of the church, but God works in many, many different ways. Sometimes he works in ways that we don't understand and a lot of people disagree with, and you know, I just keep putting one foot right in front of the other and following Christ, and that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Life in him.
I think he's always done that. You know, when you look back at the, quote, Hall of Famers in the Bible, a lot of them were, you know, some bad guys, you know. I think that people that grew up the way that you did and the way I did and have gone through all that kind of stuff, the level of pain that you suffer and bring upon yourself during that time, I think when God, you know, calls you out and separates you to himself, I think that that level of pain that you experience as a, quote, bad guy is very important to sharing the gospel. For one thing, if you're a street guy and a really bad guy, you're going to figure out how to get stuff done, you know. I mean, whatever it is you're wanting to do, you're going to make sure it happens. Unfortunately, we don't have, you know, not everybody that's a believer is willing at all costs to share the gospel with people. And to me, I basically don't have anything else. Not only do I want to do, but I mean, what else would I do, you know? It's like after, and like I said a while ago, one of the reasons that I've been dedicated to is because nobody told me. You know, God showed up on the scene and said, come with me. And I think that's scriptural too, you know. Jesus went to people on the side of the road, didn't know what was going on, and said, come with me, I'll make you fishers of men. So, here we are.
Life in him.
I've done albums, CDs, projects, whatever you call them, downloads, MP3, whatever it is. I think I've done maybe 8 or 10 gospel blues oriented CDs. I started recording again after I left Grinderswitch. I did some demos in 82 or something. For a couple of years I didn't play anywhere except in the church. In fact, for about 4 years I played in the church. Developed a ministry with Stephen Straders, who's the pastor of Ignited Church here, which, by the way, I just talked to a few minutes ago. We put together a program for like 12th graders, seniors in high school and college, young career people at the church, and I did that for about 3 years. And then I think maybe in 83 or 84, another friend of mine that I'd known in the in the world, Phil Driscoll, he and I had known each other before we were believers, and Phil had become a believer, and he got in touch with me and he said, you know, are you writing any? I said, yeah, I'm writing quite a bit. And he said, well, you need to do a record. And I said, yeah, maybe, I don't know if I do or not. And he said, if you'll go in the studio and record some demos, I'll pay for the studio time. And I said, all right, that'd be cool. I had just played on Phil's first Christian album, and he did one of my songs that I'd written on his first album, the 10 Years After album. And so I went in the studio and cut some demos, and I cut this song called I Gave Jesus My Blues. And Bob McKenzie from Refuge Records in Nashville, Christian label, they called me up and said, you know, he said, anybody can use Jesus and blues in the same sentence needs to make a record. So that was the first blues record I did, gospel blues record. That was in 85, I think, maybe something, 84, 85. It was called Sanctified Blues. And I had a bunch of my friends from Muscle Shoals and different people play on the record. And as far as I know, it was the first contemporary blues, Christian blues album. You know, there had been some, you know, Reverend Gary Davis and people like that, you know, from back in the 30s, but nobody was doing Christian blues. And I did that record, and when they sent it out to the radio stations, they'd call and track them, you know, and are you playing the record? They go, no, we threw that thing in the trash. I said, you know, we're still trying to deal with this Christian rock thing, and, you know, and then this guy shows up with, you know, a Christian blues album. We're not playing it, you know. So a lot of people dissed it, you know, because they said you can't, you know, be a Christian and have the blues, you know. And I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, if you're a Christian, you can have anything you want, you know. So, plus there's a lot of people that need to hear this, you know. And that was Sanctified Blues was the first one I did. And some people picked it up, and I had a big band together at the time, I think 9 or 10 people in the band. I was the only white guy in the band, with all black, the horn section. I began to go out and play festivals, you know, Cornerstone Festival and Creation and different festivals, Flavo Festival in Holland and Greenbelt and, you know, in England and stuff. And people were amazed because, you know, at that time it was like, not competition, but the people that were doing music then was like, you know, here I got a, you know, 9, 10-piece black blues review singing about Jesus, and my, you know, my counterparts or contemporaries was like Amy Grant and stuff like that. So it was like, you know, way, way, way different stuff. But there was a song on that album called Cool Rain, and that song caught on, you know, nationwide off of that record, and that helped a lot. You know, it went to #1 on the charts and stayed on there for a long time. In fact, they're still playing that song around the country in different places. And when I did Sanctified Blues, I had the opportunity to go to Europe and play. And then I spent the next several years, I spent 5 or 6 months out of the year in Europe somewhere, Scandinavia, you know, England, Holland, all in that area. And then I started going into the Eastern Bloc countries, to Russia and Ukraine, Lithuania, a bunch of places over there. So now I'm working on a new CD called Ain't Finished Yet, and been trying to get it out, but I keep running into all kinds of different things. I get busy, and people go, if I had a studio like that, I'd be making records every day. You know, I tell them, if you've been doing this as long as I have, having a studio is almost a detriment, you know, because it's like, well, if I don't go to today, I can go tomorrow, you know, and that turns into years sometimes. So hopefully that record will be finished real soon. I'm getting real close now.
life in Him.
You know, the thing about serving God is it should be fun. It's exciting. I've seen some real crazy miracles, you know, in the time that I've been doing this. Unexplainable stuff, you know. Actually, just sitting in this studio is pretty unexplainable in itself. But I've had an opportunity to help some other people get started. And one of the guys that's done real well that I produced and engineered his first 2 albums is Reverend Jimmy Bratcher. I met Jimmy at Sturgis one year. Me and Phil Driscoll were doing a concert out there together in Jimmy's church. Brian Zahn's church had put it together. And so Jimmy came to me and he said, I'd like to do a record. And he said, you know, if you'll do it, I'll do whatever you tell me. So we went in and did his first record and then his second record. And since then he's worked with a couple of other producers and stuff, but he's done real well, has a real successful ministry, so I'm glad to have been some small part of helping him to get started doing that. And I'm still open to doing that. You know, I've been trying to get a record done on Tony Loeffler and Johnny Mannion. And of course, Johnny's in San Diego and I'm here, but with some of the new software that's out now, you can actually set up a session and he can go to the studio there and I can record him in here. So I'm still all about doing that and writing songs.
Life in Him.
If you're listening to what I've been saying and you feel this something that's different inside of you, then it's probably the Spirit of God that's speaking to your heart. One of the lines in a song on this record talks about your mind so full of doubt, learn to listen to your heart. So your mind gets so full of all kinds of stuff, but the clarity that comes when the Spirit of God starts speaking to you is obvious. And you're probably sitting there going, yeah, this is obvious that something different's happening to me. And it's not complicated at all, you know. I mean, Christ came here as the Son of God, and He came as fully man, fully God. He came here and walked on this earth. He led a sinless life, and He died on the cross. And the only reason He did that was for you, for me. And all you have to do is accept what God has done through Jesus Christ. You know, when you talk about, you hear the phrase accept Christ, really, I think it's accepting what God has done through Christ. Sometimes people go, well, how do I do that? Well, all you have to do is just surrender and say, I realize in my heart now what God's done for me in the person of Jesus Christ. And I want to accept what He's done for me out of love. And when you do that, cleanse yourself. I mean, like, just say, God, forgive me. You know, I'm ashamed. I've been doing what I've been doing. And, you know, you don't have to be a bad boy, you know, to not be doing what you know is right in your heart. I mean, you may be a businessman or housewife or whatever. You don't have to be some crazy drugged out person, you know. Your life may seem to you like everything should be in order, but you know in your heart that it's not, because life begins in your heart, in the heart of hearts inside you. That hidden man of the heart wants to be revealed, and it's been hidden. So just get on your knees and say, God, I accept what you've done for me through Christ. Forgive me for what I've done. I want to follow you. And then just start taking one step after another. and go in that direction. And I'll guarantee you, if you'll do that, not be so concerned about what's going to happen next week or what's going to happen now that I've done this. Be more concerned about taking care of today. You know, we have no promise of tomorrow. Some people want to use that as a scare tactic, you know, to say, if you don't get saved today, you might not be here tomorrow. Well, the truth, that is the truth, you know. You may not be here tomorrow. A guitar player I've listened to for years, Alvin Lee, just died this week. And he went in for a routine surgery and died from complications of routine surgery. So there's no guarantee you'll be here tomorrow, but that's not a reason to accept Christ. You accept Christ because God's calling you out and separating you to Himself. So if you'll do that today, you'll find peace that you've never had before. Oh yeah, you'll face obstacles, but God will give you the strength to do it. And He's always got your back. In the Bible, it talks about the armor of God. And you can go in the Bible and read that. It was in Ephesians, I think. You can read about the armor of God, but I got to notice them one day it's all frontal armor. You know, the shield of faith, the sword, you know, the breastplate of righteousness, all of those things. But there's no armor on your back. That's because He's your rear guard. When you accept what God has done through Christ, He becomes your rear guard. He becomes the one watching your back. He's got you covered. So if you don't live till tomorrow, you'll be with Him for eternity. If you live 2 more days, you'll have the opportunity to share this with someone else. So don't make it complicated. Just get in there with both feet and start walking that road. It's fun, a lot of exciting things on the road.
Life in Him.
I do a lot of work in prisons, thousands of prisons. And I love going in there. For one reason, those guys in there are in a lot of pain, and I can relate to that. And I know that in Christ, they don't have to go through that kind of pain, no matter what they've done. So it's fun. Get on the road, that's the first step. God, I accept Christ by faith, and now I'm going to walk by faith. It's a good deal. Best deal going.
I don't know what's up with Lakeland. Steven Strader, Larry Howard, Carl Straders. I have nothing more to say than we have a good God, so get right with God today. That's the best thing you can do. Until next time, stay blessed.